When my daughter declared I was too emotional and incompetent to handle my husband's $50 million estate, she didn't know I'd discovered her plot 6 months earlier and had prepared a lesson she'd never forget. Let me know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. My name is Minerva Blackthorn, and at 67 years old, I found myself facing the ultimate betrayal, not from a stranger, but from my own daughter. I wasn't always the grieving widow my daughter tried to paint me as. 45 years ago, I was a brilliant young accountant who helped build Blackthorn and Associates from a small construction firm into a $200 million empire. I wasn't just Cornelius Blackthorn's wife. I was his partner, his first accountant, and the financial brain behind our success. The story of Blackthorn and Associates began in a cramped office above a hardware store in South Boston. It was 1979 and the construction industry was booming. Cornelius had the vision and charm, but his books were a disaster. I still remember the first time he walked into Fitzgerald and Associates, the small accounting firm where I worked as a junior accountant. He carried a cardboard box overflowing with crumpled receipts, coffee-stained invoices, and unopened tax notices. "Miss Minerva," he said with that disarming smile, his Boston accent thick as molasses. "I need a miracle worker, and Jimmy Fitzgerald says you're the best he's got." I was 22, fresh out of Boston University with top honors in accounting and finance, the only woman in my graduating class. In those days, female accountants were rare and successful ones. Even rarer, I was hungry to prove myself in a field dominated by men who thought women belonged in secretarial pools, not boardrooms. Cornelius was 25, rough around the edges, but with an energy that filled the room. His construction business was growing faster than he could manage, and he was hemorrhaging money through poor financial management. His previous bookkeeper had quit after 3 months, calling his records hopeless. "Mr. Blackthorn," I said, pulling on my professional demeanor like armor, "your books aren't hopeless, they're just creatively organized." He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that echoed through the small office. Creatively organized. That's the nicest way anyone's ever called me a disaster. Over the next 6 months, I transformed his chaos into order. I worked nights and weekends poring over every receipt, every contract, every bank statement. I discovered his former bookkeeper had been embezzling funds, nearly $30,000 a fortune. In those days, I implemented systems for tracking expenses, created budgets for each project, and negotiated better terms with suppliers. But I did more than just clean up his books. I saw potential in his business that even Cornelius hadn't recognized. I suggested expanding into commercial construction, identified tax incentives for urban development, and created financial projections that showed how we could triple revenue within 5 years. When I presented him with his first proper financial statement, showing a 40% increase in profit margins, he stared at the numbers in disbelief. "Marry me," he said, right there in my office. I laughed, thinking it was another of his jokes. "Mr. Blackthorn, that's highly unprofessional." "I'm serious," he replied, his blue eyes intense. "I don't just need an accountant, I need a partner, someone who sees what I miss, who can build something lasting with me." "You barely know me," I protested. "I know enough. I know you worked 60-hour weeks to save my business. I know you caught theft that I missed for months. I know you see potential where others see problems. And I know I'm a better businessman when you're around." 6 months later, I became Minerva Blackthorn. Our wedding was small but beautiful, held in the garden of his parents' home in Beacon Hill. My father, a stern mathematics professor, walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. "You've got a good head for numbers, Minnie," he whispered. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those early years were intense. We worked side by side, 16-hour days, 7 days a week. While Cornelius managed construction sites and charmed clients, I handled every financial aspect of the business. I negotiated our first $1 million contract with the city of Boston, convincing skeptical officials that a small firm could handle a major infrastructure project. I pioneered, Computerized accounting in our industry. When most construction companies still used paper ledgers, I taught myself programming to customize our financial software, working late into the night while Cornelius slept. When personal computers became available, I insisted we invest in them despite the cost. Computers. Our foreman scoffed. What's wrong with good old-fashioned paperwork? Nothing, I replied, except that it's slow error-prone and can't predict cash flow 6 months in advance. This computer will pay for itself in 3 months. It paid for itself in 2. By 1985, Blackthorne and Associates had grown from a 5-person operation to a company with over 100 employees. We'd expanded beyond Boston, taking on projects throughout New England. Our reputation for quality work and financial stability, unusual in the volatile construction industry, brought us increasingly lucrative contracts. When our children came along, first Lysander in 1987, then Aurelia 5 years later, I gradually shifted my focus. By then we could afford a full financial team. I trained my replacement, a brilliant young CFO named Patricia Wong, ensuring she understood not just our systems but our values. I remained chairman of the board, but stepped back from day-to-day operations. I thought I was building a legacy for our children, creating something they could inherit and grow. I taught them about business from an early age, bringing them to the office, explaining concepts at their level. Lysander showed an early aptitude for engineering, spending hours building elaborate structures with his toys. Aurelia was different. Sharp, ambitious, always asking why, and challenging answers. I saw myself in her fierce intelligence and determination. I never imagined that one day that same daughter would try to steal everything Cornelius and I had built. The first hint of trouble came during what should have been a happy occasion. Aurelia's 35th birthday celebration at our family estate in Wellesley. The house, a sprawling Tudor we'd bought in 1995, was filled with family and friends. I was in the kitchen putting finishing touches on her favorite chocolate ganache cake, a recipe I'd perfected over years of birthday celebrations. The kitchen windows were open to the warm June evening, and voices carried from the conservatory. I heard Aurelia talking to her husband Thaddeus in low, urgent tones. "Dad's health is declining," Aurelia said. "His last checkup wasn't good. The doctor mentioned concerns about his heart." "What about your mother?" Thaddeus asked. "Please," Aurelia scoffed. "She hasn't touched the books in decades. She spends her days gardening and hosting charity teas. When Dad goes, she'll be lost. We'll need to step in quickly to protect the family interests." I froze, chocolate-covered spatula in hand. Protect the family interests from whom? From me. The company's worth at least $200 million now. Thaddeus continued. With proper management, we could double that in 5 years. Exactly, Aurelia replied, but we need to move fast. Mom's sentimental. She'll want to keep Dad's pet projects running, even the ones that lose money. She doesn't understand modern business. I set down the spatula, my hands shaking. My own daughter was planning to push me aside the moment Cornelius died. She thought I was some doddering old fool who couldn't understand modern business. I said nothing that night, playing the role of the proud mother serving cake and smiling for photos. But inside, something had shifted. I began to watch, to listen, to investigate. What I discovered over the next 6 months chilled me to the bone. Aurelia and Thaddeus were meeting regularly with corporate lawyers I didn't recognize. They were quietly building relationships with certain board members, the younger ones who didn't remember the company's early days. They were reviewing documents related to the company's structure, asking questions about succession planning. Once I caught Aurelia photographing pages from Cornelius's private files. She'd waited until he was napping, slipping into his study with her phone. "Aurelia," I said from the doorway, "what are you doing?" She jumped, nearly dropping her phone. "Mother, I was just... Dad asked me to check something for him." "Really? Because he's asleep upstairs." Her face flushed. "It's urgent company business. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I challenged. She laughed dismissively. "Mom, When's the last time you even looked at a balance sheet? The business world has moved on. It's all about derivatives and international tax strategies. Now just leave it to the professionals. I smiled and said nothing. But that night, after everyone was asleep, I began my own investigation. Let us know where you're watching from today, and if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. I started by accessing our home office computer. Cornelius, bless him, never changed his passwords. They were still our anniversary date. What I found made my blood run cold. Emails between Aurelia and Thaddeus discussed Project Sunset, their code name for taking control of the company after Cornelius's death. They'd been planning for over a year, identifying vulnerabilities in our corporate structure, mapping out which board members to target, preparing legal documents that would transfer control to them under the guise of modernizing our governance. They'd even consulted with a psychiatrist, Dr. Helena Voss, about potential grounds for declaring me mentally incompetent should I resist. The notes from that consultation were particularly painful to read. Subject is 67, recently showing signs of cognitive decline. Overly emotional, fixated on past glory days. Recommend monitoring for signs of dementia. In event of spouse's death, grief could exacerbate existing vulnerabilities. Consider cognitive evaluation if subject resists necessary business decisions. But their biggest mistake was underestimating me. They thought I'd become a doddering old woman who couldn't understand modern finance. They forgot that I'd learned this game when it was played with adding machines and ledger books, not computers and spreadsheets. The tools change, the principles remain the same. I began preparing my counterattack with the same methodical precision I'd once used to build the company. First, I called in favors from old friends in the financial world. Eleanor Whitaker, my former classmate who now ran a forensic accounting firm in New York, agreed to conduct a secret audit. Minerva, she said when I explained the situation. Are you sure about this? Investigating your own daughter? I'm sure, I replied. I need to know how deep this goes. Marcus Chen, a cybersecurity expert. I'd helped early in his career install monitoring software on our corporate network, completely legal. He assured me, you're the chairman. You have the right to monitor company communications. The evidence poured in. Aurelia and Thaddeus had already begun siphoning money through inflated legal fees and fake consulting contracts. They'd created a web of shell companies to hide assets. They were planning to transfer key patents and intellectual property out of the company before making their move. Most shocking was discovering that my son Lysander knew about their plans. He hadn't actively participated, but he'd attended several meetings and hadn't warned me or his father. When confronted later, he'd claim he was trying to stay neutral and didn't want to get involved in family drama. I documented everything meticulously, creating files both digital and physical. I stored copies in multiple locations: a safety deposit box, my lawyer's office, and encrypted cloud storage. I wasn't just preparing for a legal battle. I was preparing for war. 6 months into my investigation, the unthinkable happened. Cornelius had his heart attack. It was a Tuesday morning in October. He'd gone to the office early to work on plans for our new sustainable housing division, a project he was passionate about. His secretary found him slumped over his desk at 7:30 a.m. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. The doctor said it was quick that he didn't suffer. But I suffered. Oh, how I suffered. 45 years of partnership, of love, of building something together. Gone in an instant. At the funeral, while I was drowning in grief, Aurelia was already maneuvering. She stood beside me in her designer black suit, playing the devoted daughter while texting her lawyer about accelerating the timeline. The funeral was massive. Cornelius had touched many lives. Employees who'd worked with us for decades, clients who'd become friends, community leaders we'd supported. The mayor spoke. The governor sent condolences. But through it all, I watched Aurelia, working the room, making connections, laying groundwork. The day after we buried Cornelius, she made her first move. "Mother," she said, settling into Cornelius's leather chair in his study, a liberty she'd never have dared take while he was alive. We need to discuss the transition. You're in no state to make decisions right now. I sat across from her, still in my black dress, tissues clutched in my hand. My eyes were red from crying, my hair disheveled. I looked every bit the broken widow. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. She slid a folder across the desk. "These are power of attorney documents. Just temporary until you're feeling more yourself. Thaddeus and I will handle everything. The company, the estate, all the financial decisions. You can focus on grieving." I opened the folder with shaking hands. The documents would give her complete control over both my personal finances and my shares in the company. It was a complete takeover disguised as filial concern. "This seems extensive," I murmured, pretending to struggle with the legal language. "It's standard." She assured me, her voice syrupy with false sympathy. "Dad would want the company protected during this difficult time. You know how the board can be. Sharks smelling blood in the water. We can't show any weakness." I dabbed at my eyes. "I need time to think." "Of course," she said, patting my hand condescendingly. "But don't take too long. The quarterly board meeting is next month, and we need to present a united front. The markets are already nervous about the transition." Over the next few weeks, I played my part perfectly. I wandered the house in my bathrobe, forgot appointments, cried at random moments. When Aurelia visited, I'd be surrounded by photo albums lost in memories. I let bills pile up, unopened, ignored phone calls, and generally acted like a woman undone by grief. "She's worse than I thought." I overheard Aurelia tell Thaddeus during one visit, "We might not need the psychiatrists after all. She's practically catatonic." Meanwhile, I was working 18-hour days in secret. I converted the pool house into a command center, telling everyone I needed a quiet place to grieve. In reality, it was filled with computers, documents, and evidence of Aurelia's betrayal. Eleanor's forensic audit revealed the full scope of the theft. Nearly $3 million diverted over 2 years through a complex network of transactions designed to look like legitimate business expenses. Marcus's surveillance uncovered emails detailing plans to force me out completely, sell off valuable divisions, and restructure the company for a quick profit. But I needed more than evidence. I needed allies. I reached out to key board members, the ones who'd been with us from the early days. Harold Morrison, our longest-serving director, was horrified when I showed him the evidence. "This isn't modernization," he said, reviewing the plans to sell our affordable housing division. "This is asset stripping." Cornelius would be appalled. I also contacted our major clients, the ones whose relationships I'd cultivated over decades. Jennifer Walsh, CEO of our biggest client, Walsh Development, was particularly outraged. "Minerva," she said over lunch at a discreet restaurant in Cambridge, "you personally saved our project during the 2008 crisis. You restructured our debt, negotiated with banks, kept us afloat. If you're out, we're reconsidering our contracts." 3 weeks before the board meeting, Aurelia made her biggest play. She arrived at the house with Thaddeus and 2 men I didn't recognize. "Mother, this is Dr. Patel and Dr. Hoffman," she said smoothly. "They're here to help evaluate your current state of mind. It's just a formality for the insurance companies." I recognized the trap immediately. These were the psychiatrists she'd been consulting about having me declared incompetent. I smiled sweetly. "Of course, dear. Would you gentlemen like some tea? I just made cookies." For the next 2 hours, I played the part of the confused widow to perfection. I answered their questions with just enough vagueness to concern them, but not enough to justify immediate action. When they asked about the company, I rambled about the early days, mixing up dates and names. "And what year did you start the company?" Dr. Patel asked. "Oh, it was, let me think, 1987. No, that was when Lysander was born. Or was it 1992? Cornelius would know. Where is Cornelius?" After they left, Aurelia could barely contain her satisfaction. "They'll recommend a cognitive evaluation," she said. "It's for your own good. Mother." "Whatever you think is best, dear," I replied meekly. What Aurelia didn't know was that I'd recorded the entire session. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state for recordings, but I was in my own home, and I'd had my lawyer post a small notice by the front door about security cameras. It was perfectly legal. The night before the board meeting, I called my children to the house. Lysander arrived first, looking uncomfortable. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Guilt, I hoped Aurelia, came with Thaddeus carrying a briefcase full of documents. They were dressed in matching power suits, ready for corporate warfare. "Mother," she began, "I'm glad you called us. We need to discuss tomorrow's meeting. I've prepared a statement for you to read announcing your retirement and endorsing our transition plan." I sat in Cornelius's chair, my chair now, and looked at my children. The moment had come. "Before we discuss tomorrow," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I want to show you something." I pressed a button on the desk. The wood paneling slid aside, revealing a hidden screen, something Cornelius had installed but never used. The screen lit up with the presentation I'd spent weeks preparing. "Let's talk about Project Sunset," I said calmly. Aurelia's face went white. "Mother, I don't know what you've heard, but—" "Slide 1, I continued, shows the shell companies you've created. Slide 2 details the $8 million you've stolen so far. Slide 3 outlines your plan to have me declared incompetent." "This is ridiculous," Thaddeus blustered, standing up. "We're leaving." "Sit down," I commanded, my voice carrying the authority of decades in boardrooms. "You'll leave when I say you can leave." For the next hour, I methodically destroyed them. Every email, every secret meeting, every forged document. I had it all. Lysander looked increasingly sick as he realized the full extent of his sister's plans. "You thought I was just a grieving old woman," I said finally. "You forgot that I built this company's financial systems. I wrote the protocols you tried to use against me. I know every loophole because I created them." Aurelia was crying now. Real tears, not the fake ones she'd used to manipulate others. "Mother, please." "I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you planned to steal your father's legacy before his body was cold. That you consulted psychiatrists about having me committed. That you've been embezzling from the company for 2 years. I turned to Lysander. "And you knew and said nothing. Your father would be ashamed." "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. I thought I was protecting everyone by staying neutral." "There's no neutral when your family is under attack," I replied. The board meeting the next day was a massacre. I'd invited not just the board, but also our major shareholders, key clients, and, surprise guests, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Aurelia walked in expecting to present her transition plan. Instead, she found herself facing criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The FBI agents I'd been working with for weeks took her and Thaddeus into custody right there in the boardroom. As they led her out in handcuffs, she looked at me with a mixture of shock and grudging respect. "How?" she asked. "I'm your mother." I replied, "I know you better than you know yourself. I knew what you were planning before you did." The aftermath was brutal but necessary. Aurelia and Thaddeus faced federal charges. To avoid prison, they agreed to a plea deal. They would return all stolen funds, pay substantial fines, perform 2,000 hours of community service, and be barred from any leadership role in the company for life. Lysander resigned from his executive position. I sent him to run our smallest division in Detroit, a struggling operation in a poor neighborhood. Learn what real hardship looks like. I told him, then maybe you'll understand what your father and I built this company to fight against. The business world was stunned. The story made national headlines. Widow outsmarts Wall Street lawyers in corporate coup. Forbes ran a cover story, the 67-year-old who proved experience trumps youth. But I wasn't finished. I used the publicity to launch the Cornelius Blackthorne Institute for Corporate Ethics. I established scholarships for older women returning to finance after career breaks. I modernized our company's operations, proving that experience and innovation aren't mutually exclusive. Today, 5 years later, Blackthorne and Associates is stronger than ever. We're valued at $500 million and are industry leaders in sustainable construction. I'm still chairman, though. I'm grooming a successor from outside the family. Aurelia completed her community service and now works as a public defender, helping elderly victims of financial abuse. She's good at it. Her own fall from grace gave her empathy she'd lacked before. I understand now. She told me recently over coffee, our monthly reconciliation meeting. I was so obsessed with proving I was smarter than you that I forgot everything you taught me about integrity. Lysander returned from Detroit transformed. He'd spent 3 years living among the people our company was meant to serve. He implemented revolutionary programs for affordable housing and urban renewal. Last year, I promoted him to CEO, a position he earned through merit, not birthright. As for me, I remarried last year. Dr. Samuel Richardson, a widowed professor of economics. I met at a conference. He appreciates both my mind and my heart. Something my children had forgotten was possible. Recently, I gave a speech at Harvard Business School. Standing at the podium where my daughter once graduated, I told my story to a room full of ambitious young minds. The mistake my daughter made, I said, wasn't ambition. It was assumption. She assumed that age equals obsolescence, that experience becomes irrelevant. She forgot that true wisdom isn't about knowing the latest trends. It's about understanding fundamental principles. After the speech, a young woman approached me, Ms. Blackthorne. She said, "I'm starting my own company. Do you have any advice?" I smiled. 3 things. First, never underestimate anyone, especially those with experience. Second, integrity isn't optional, it's essential. And third, build something worth protecting. Then protect it with everything you have. The last time I visited Cornelius's grave, I brought him his favorite scotch and a copy of Forbes magazine with my picture on the cover. I sat on the bench beside his headstone and talked to him like I always do. "You always said I was the smartest person you knew," I told him. "I just proved it in ways neither of us expected. Our daughter learned the hard way that wisdom doesn't expire with age. It appreciates." The sun was setting over the cemetery, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from a young accountant in love, to a widow fighting for her legacy, to a woman who'd found strength in her darkest hour. If you've ever been underestimated because of your age or gender, share your story in the comments below. Remember, your experience is your strength, not your weakness. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of wisdom triumphing over arrogance.